Sri Lanka is in crisis almost in all sense. In the capital Colombo last week, authorities fired tear gas and water cannons at protesters who had gathered outside the home of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, clamoring for his resignation. The country of 22 million people is going through the pains of a major economic crisis, one not seen since its independence in 1948, coupled with a severe shortage of foreign currency, vital to the payment of tremendous amounts of Chinese-funded debt. The government had little choice but to ban critical imports. This left the country with a shortage of everyday essential items. The past few years had been particularly difficult for Sri Lanka. The country had been devastated by the tourism-related impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the fallout from the Easter Sunday bombing in 2019. These factors had shaken the confidence of foreign investors as well as tourists. Many in Sri Lanka depend on the $4.4 billion tourism industry, which slumped 70% in May 2019 due to the terrorist attack. Because of COVID-19, the Sri Lankan economy lost more than $3 billion over the first 8 months of 2021. In this period of economic uncertainty, however, there is an opportunity for India and Sri Lanka to patch up more than a decade of chaotic bilateral relations. As Colombo reels under economic, food and fuel crisis, New Delhi should step forward to repair and restore the traditional relationship it had with this island neighbor. India-Sri Lanka ties turned cold and unfriendly during Mahinda Rajapaksa's presidency, that is from 2005 to 15. The Sri Lankan president used the availability of Chinese credit to buy himself domestic legitimacy and tighten his grip over power. Especially after 2012, when India censured Sri Lanka for human rights violations during its 3-decade-long civil war, Sri Lanka moved into the Chinese orbit. It firmed up a series of agreements that it had signed with China beginning in 2005, including a $1.35 billion deal to construct the coal-fired Lak Vijaya power plant in Puttalam and the controversial Hambantota port. Sri Lanka eventually lost the Hambantota port when it began to struggle with the repayment of loans. It resulted in the port and more than 15,000 acres of land being handed over to Beijing in a 99-year lease. India was right to worry when the leases gave China an advantage for using it as a possible strategic military port. By the way, the East Container Terminal of the Colombo port was supposed to be offered to India and Japan, but Sri Lanka backed out after local resistance. When Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar visited Sri Lanka in January 2021, he expressed concern that China was behind delays in Colombo's decision-making on Indian investments in Sri Lanka, including the one in partnership with Japan in the East Container Terminal project. Sri Lanka's ambitions for a lucrative future, conveniently financed by Chinese loans, have been ruined by the downturn in the Sri Lankan economy. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa asked Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in January 2022 to restructure Colombo's debt repayments as a part of efforts to relieve pressure on its economy. After realizing the limits of economic and strategic cooperation with China and the embarrassing situation in Sri Lanka, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had undertaken his maiden overseas trip to India in November 2019. A flurry of visits by other Sri Lankan leaders to Delhi have followed. To allay India's concerns, Sri Lanka has not only tried to balance its relations with India, but also it declared an India First policy in October 2020. Furthermore, the Sri Lankan leadership has realized that India has always stepped in when Sri Lanka needed it, and the relationship with China could not be at the expense of India. Now, if India wants to loosen China's grip and restore its traditional influence over Sri Lanka, she must act swiftly. China has been quick to lend assistance, offering a $1.5 billion line of credit and a $1 billion loan. It has also pushed for acceleration of the China-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement, which China says will benefit local Sri Lankan goods. China also sent 2,000 tons of rice to address food shortages. To its credit, New Delhi provided Colombo with a $1 billion line of credit for food, medicine and other essential items. India's Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla recently reiterated that Sri Lanka is a core part of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's neighbourhood first policy. With inflation at 14.2% eating away the ability of Sri Lankans to afford daily essentials, India, which has the resources, should extend them support through supplies of food, medicine and other essential goods. India has already responded by sending $500 million worth of fuel, but almost all of it was used up last week. As Sri Lanka struggles, India should embrace the spirit of neighbourhood first policy and restore the image of a traditional partner with Sri Lanka. It should develop a Marshall Plan for the economically devastated island. Now, to conclude, we have to remember that continued instability in Sri Lanka will have repercussions in India. It could be a burden for India and not China.